Okay, our next discussion is going to be mobile security and best practices for security in closed cultures. So this has been one of the most requested conversations of our previous MMF consultations in the past, and we've never had anybody who was actually willing to talk about it and knew what they were talking about, and most everybody said, I don't know anything about that. I don't want to do it. So we've had a couple panels and we've had a couple different people try, but I'm excited. I'm really setting John up here, but I'm excited having seen his presentation and to see what he has to say about all this stuff. So John Stearly is the Director of Technology Development at Faith Comes by Hearing, where he provides technical oversight efforts, including Render, Virtual Recording, and Global Bible Network. He's worked for Sandia National Laboratories, where he was involved with supercomputers, data mining, and cybersecurity. So he lives in New Mexico and with his family of, I'll let him get into that if he wants to. So thank you very much. Let's give a hand to John.
Thank you. Morning. I don't know if I said that all right. I was running the other day and I said good morning. I said morning. So this is my first MMF, so I'm the new guy who didn't know better not to say, no, I can't speak on that topic. So as he said, I did work at National Laboratories, so most of my security and cybersecurity experience and knowledge is in a different context. So I would absolutely not claim to be an expert on closed cultures. However, I do have some relevant background, and I have been very actively seeking advice and counsel from very experienced folks, some of whom are in this room. So thank you for your help if you've been answering my questions. Yeah, and I'm just praying that God would use me to help someone. So hopefully I won't say the wrong thing. So with that, I'm going to share 4 principles. So I'm not here to try to make you an expert in 18 minutes on closed culture security. What I am here to do is try to share some general principles that will help you to think through the topic and discuss it with your team and try to make progress. So those are, first, to be aware. And these are listed really in what I would rank as importance order. You need to be aware of what threats you're facing. So that is number 1, to know both your opponent and yourself, your own weaknesses. Second, to be normal, and that is to intentionally blend into the crowd. Not just you happened to, but actually take very intentional steps to study the culture, to study the behaviors, and intentionally step into that to fit the profile. Third, to be separate, where you actually intentionally put distance between information that is sensitive and not sensitive. So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, to be secret. And so you've heard it said that God works in mysterious ways. And we can too, actually. It's okay. I've always been troubled. Jesus says, be as crafty as a serpent. That seems disturbing to me. However, there is a time and a place for that. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so number 1, be aware. It's important to ask the right question. So asking, is this secure, is not necessarily the right question. It's a little bit too vague. Is it secure against what? What threat are you defending? Are you trying to protect yourself from the government, your local government? Which government? Or family members? Someone in the room here told me a story earlier this week of a young girl who was killed for what was found on her phone, Christian materials on her phone. And so who discovered these materials? Was it a border guard or police? It was her father. So that is the reality that some of you are facing in closed cultures. So you have to consider, who am I defending against? And that should inform what countermeasures you'll take to to try to combat those. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to at least give you a taste of the right questions. These are the type of things you should be discussing with your team. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to say on that. Other than there is some accounts that the Great Wall of China was defeated not by an army plowing through, but by a bribe, a simple bribe. So it's not always, your technical link may not be your weakest link, just to say that. Okay, I'm going to run through just a few short slides on network communications. So, because I wasn't sure of the audience, the level of audience here, but I did want to say, I did think it was worth saying that if you're not using encrypted communication, everything in that communication stream is completely open. It's visible. And it's visible to anyone who would be on the same Wi-Fi network. So if you're on this network and you log into your bank with HTTP, which your bank probably won't let you. However, if there is a service that's asking for sensitive information over HTTP, if I'm in this room, any of you could easily run a program to just capture that information. It's like sending a postcard. You can just read it. So that is a fact. And it's similar for anyone that has administrative privileges anywhere along the transmission path, in your country or a next country or the receiving country. With network encryption, however, the inner portions are encrypted in green, so essentially unreadable unless the person is highly motivated and has a lot of money. The really fantastic computers, it might be possible to read that. However, the outer portions are still visible, so you can still see, like if I were to connect to some network service, anyone in the room could observe me doing that. And it's easy to look up the location of really that sending IP address, as well as the owning entity that owns that network, such as this conference's ISP, Internet Service Provider. So just so you know, that is a fact on that. So how about mobile devices? So typically mobile devices will use a private IP. Actually, in this room, they're private IPs also, so it would be assigned. What's visible to an outside viewer is like the Internet Service Provider for the conference center. So it's similar with your phone network. So I may be in this city, but my data may appear in the city adjacent here, or maybe 10 miles north or something. So it's just to say kind of communications over phones. And I was speaking with Tommy, and he said, apparently Putin doesn't carry a cell phone anymore. And mafia leaders apparently don't carry cell phones. And so really, if you're trying to avoid the local government, you need to pray really hard and just limit your technology. But it's mostly you're depending on the Lord at that point. Because there's triangulation. They can get you within 1 to 100 meters, depending on the density of cell towers, stuff like that. Is a VPN secure? Are all VPNs secure? Absolutely not. It's only as secure as your provider. So if you're getting a free VPN, it may not be worth much. It may be just set up as a front where you think you have the perception of security, and so you're gonna relax your posture, and they're just gonna collect everything. So I would say that's fairly common. So get a reputable VPN service if you want to use that. Okay. So I don't know, how many people are familiar with Where's Waldo game? Is this fairly common? Okay, so most people. I wasn't sure if this is going to be a cross-cultural problem or not. So Where's Waldo? Really, the main practice I would recommend is to hide in the crowd. So it's really impossible to be invisible, not only physically, with the number of surveillance cameras and everything, or just neighbors. So it's impossible to hide physically. It's even less possible to hide, to be invisible on a network. They can observe your behavior for sure, but you can be difficult to identify. So has anyone picked out Waldo here? It's awfully small. So there he is. He's actually standing in a somewhat crowded area of that picture with that bench there. So he's doing a good job maybe obscuring himself. I'm going to find a really busy place and hide there. So this is a general strategy. On a network, this is a mapping of the internet. And so on the outer edges would be all of us, and the really big service providers and backbone providers would be on the inside. So what I would recommend is you use the really popular service providers. So you're out on the edges, and you're connecting into an inner node that's very highly connected. And so an observer, let's say on a Wi-Fi network, might be able to see that you are connecting with Gmail, but beyond that, they can't see who you're talking with or anything like that. So that's one way to hide in the crowd on the network. And popular services like Gmail and WhatsApp, this will be true of those. And I would consider WhatsApp to be quite secure. They have so much encryption. It's really impressive. I don't know if I would trust Facebook quite yet. Their private messenger service, I don't know a lot about it technically, but just given the purpose of the company, I don't know that I would trust it. So being normal. So learn what is typical for your region. So MMF has an atlas. That's a fantastic resource. Even more so, just talk with people on the ground. What is normal apps? What are normal practices? What are the typical coffee shops? It's great to meet in coffee shops, but if you're meeting several people in the evening, don't meet each of them sequentially in the same coffee shop. I would recommend you rotate your shops. Meet someone here at 7, someone here at 8, right? And you don't want to be too predictable. So you would want to rotate that, but go to the usual places. And so the topic of social networks, of course, that's very normal. However, they exist to facilitate connections. So really what you want to do is avoid putting sensitive contacts, any sensitive information on social networks, especially that will connect sensitive relationships. So that enables an opponent to have more information across all of your connections, as well as increases the scope of the impact. So they might find you and your friends and their families, etc. So countermeasures can obviously raise suspicion. So if I'm walking through an airport with this briefcase, is it secure? It's really about suspicion. Are your countermeasures raising suspicion or not? So there are really fantastic tools like Proton Mail. These are hidden. The data is encrypted under a big mountain in Switzerland. It's very secure from a technical perspective. However, if you're the only person in some Central Asian nation using Proton Mail, you might stand out. So I would not recommend that. Similarly with a technology called Tor. Who's familiar with Tor? Okay, just a few of you. It also has many layers of encryption. Really an amazing tool, but this is secure enough for things like organized crime. So you probably don't want to associate yourself with that crowd. You'll probably subject yourself to additional scrutiny using those tools. Similarly with apps that are specifically for file encryption, and that says that in the name, or app hider or something. Really what you need is a good cover story for all of the apps on your phone, and you're going to have a hard time coming up with a good cover story for that. Okay, being separate. So you probably heard the phrase connecting the dots. So this dot to dot is not too hard to figure out, but what you want to do is make it more difficult for opponent or attacker to connect the dots. So I'd recommend you intentionally try to put distance between information. A couple ways to do that is to use different Gmail addresses, kind of split personalities. You could have one for family, one for sensitive contacts, Maybe you have an address you're using with just one person. And really, you should never connect your sensitive and not sensitive addresses. So you wouldn't give your sensitive address over your non-sensitive. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, that would be fine. In fact, I think that's a good idea because that's a way to hide. So if you're always connecting to Gmail, let's say, and that's all that's visible from a network monitoring perspective, let's say you're interrogated, okay, well, show us your Gmail account. Okay, log in, no problem, into your non-sensitive one. It might be that easy. It just depends on how motivated they are. Okay. Okay, getting into be secret. So plenty of biblical examples. Here's Rahab hiding the spies. Joshua sent them out in secret. And I should say that I had much more to say than I felt that I had time for. So there's about twice the number of slides in this deck as I'm presenting. So I put all kinds of links to articles, best practices, and I believe those will be on the website. So feel free to take those and review those for additional information. And that includes, I just did a little study, so maybe I had like 6 or 8 occasions of kind of being secret in Scripture. So here's just some practical ideas. You can simply put in a file called no media in a directory, and media players will ignore it. I don't know, did you know that? It's so simple. Sorry? This is Android specific. So my comments are Android specific because they're so prevalent in the communities that we're talking about. Renaming a file and just changing the suffix. So all Android phones have a built-in tool called File Manager. Talk about being normal. Everything has it. So you can just use it. You could just drop a no media file into place or just rename the suffix of a file. So if you have a video file that you don't want to be easily playable or findable, you could just simply change the suffix from MP3, something like .dat, D-A-T, or .sqlite. You could look around your files and see what are common file suffixes, just change the name. That way, if someone's kind of browsing, if your father, perhaps, is browsing through your phone, he doesn't just easily stumble, oh, there's an MP3 file. Click and he's in. Just changing the extension on the file name is a super easy way to do that. And to replace the functionality, you just change the suffix back. Simple. Another way to do this is to simply start a file name with a period. So that hides the file. And in File Manager, there's a setting. You can say show hidden files or don't show hidden files. So that's not a super high bar of security, but it might be sufficient. It's just really easy. Just go in there, put a little dot on the front of the file name, you're done. Number 2. So certainly you could use encryption passwords on PDFs or other files. There's all kinds of tools to do this, including one called ES File Explorer. So this is an extremely common and popular File Explorer app on Android. It will do all kinds of good things for you, like encrypting. You can form a zip. So let's say you have a directory. It's got MP3s, it's got PDFs, it's got all kinds of Christian material. With this tool, you could just zip it. You could encrypt it, maybe stick it down in this directory. I don't know if you've ever looked on your phone directory, but if you go to Android, data, there's pretty much a directory there for every app on your phone. So it's easy to find tens or hundreds of directories there. What a crowded place. And then you click on that, and there's 6 more directories. So some of these, they'll go down like maybe 3 or 4, 5, 6 directories. Underneath, there's a room with 100 doors. And the next room has 6 doors, and the next room has 2 doors. And then you could stick your encrypted zip file hidden as .dat. So perhaps as you're crossing into a country, you might want to do this. This might be an effective way to kind of hide that data. And then once you're in country, you could just expand that and distribute the content. A practical idea. Let's see. So another idea is to use a facade. So I have heard a story of in China, there was, I guess, a travel agency site, and the Christian community could log into it, and there was a portion of that site where there was all kinds of Christian material hidden, and that was apparently extremely effective for that community. So you could use that technique, and I think it'd be great if someone here wrote a game that was actually fun, but it had some secret door in it that was a facade. So someone said, what is this? Oh, it's a game I like to play. Here, let me show you. You want a copy or something? I don't know. And it would have a secret door in it. I do need to stop, and I will in just a moment. But lastly, a best practice would be, another idea is to just share a Gmail account with a single person. You never actually press send. So I'm trying to talk with Jane. That maybe that's not culturally appropriate or something. Maybe we create a Google account. We share the password, write a message to each other, maybe just leave it in the drafts folder, never even send it. The next person, would periodically check that and reply. This would be kind of a sneaky way. This was suggested by someone in this room this week. Or if someone's traveling out of country for a discipleship training, it might be important to give them some kind of like a vocational training as well. That would be practically helpful. But also give them a certificate. So as they're going back into country, and they're, why did you go on this travel? Oh, well, I took some vocational training. See, I have a certificate. And they could talk intelligently about that topic, and that provides kind of support for the cover story. So these are just, I hope some of that was helpful, and that was it.
It was very good. Thank you. All right, Q&A. We have some time for Q&A. So I can pass the mic around.
John, are you familiar with the Knox system on Samsung devices at all?
No.
Okay. I know if you've got a newer Samsung device, they've extended this. They've got something called a secure file folder. It's an app you actually have to download, but that's available for newer Android devices. That's a secure folder. There are plenty of apps out there that allow you to hide stuff as well, but this is one that is bundled into some Samsung devices now.
Yeah, so newer versions of Android do have encryption built in. Yeah, so that'll be normal.
What are your thoughts on TrueCrypt? It encrypts everything, and then you need a password to get in. Is that raising suspicion?
I would say, how abnormal is that for your setting? So most encryption tools are decent. So I wouldn't pick out any particular one, but if you're going to use encryption, just try to find something that's fairly common, perhaps. And, I wouldn't feel too bad using Proton Mail in America, in my context, but I would somewhere else. And I forgot to say earlier, I missed kind of a joke in there, but only install trusted software. And so if you're working in a Central Asian nation that used to be part of the Soviet bloc, should you use Kaspersky virus software or antivirus software? Probably not. You want to look at the provider of the software and kind of think about what that might mean. Okay, so that was an aside.
What guidance or best practices do you have related to situations where you have, say, expats and nationals working alongside each other, and nationals maybe have a different perspective on security, and so they willingly and openly use sort of the common messaging platforms or whatever platforms, and to them, they've just grown up in this, and they don't feel threatened by the government, whereas like expats do. The reality is there's probably a threat, but nationals don't feel it as acutely, and they more willingly take risks. So what guidance or best practices would you give there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Are some of our closed country experts in the room willing to speak to that? Because I don't have a lot of field experience to answer that. It would be better if there's a hand back there. I would like to defer that answer to someone.
Just a couple quick thoughts that we have is that we want to take their security more seriously than they do. So the threat is probably more toward them than to us. They'll probably just kick us out, but more could happen to them. So if they are, like I had on WhatsApp and Viber, I had every one of the people that I was doing update their software so that the encryption, the end-to-end encryption was true in our conversations. Also, they probably have a secure email and a not secure email, and so even if they hit me in a non-secure email, I reply to their secure email so that I'm taking the best practices to keep them safe.
Yeah, this is, just continuous uphill battle with our national partners, from taking pictures at trainings when you're like, there's no photos, don't share photos, and they're, from communication, all that stuff. The only thing that we know to do is just continually just try to educate them and show them that it's not good to get black marketed software off of from their store. It's not good to use some of these. This would be a better, app to use, and this is a better form of communication. But it's a continuous uphill battle. But just education is the only thing. Just keep on telling them.
So I'll make a real quick comment on that. One of the things that I didn't present is be clean. And you should know that red light district type of areas on the internet are just rife with malware. So you should personally stay out of that, not only for moral reasons, but for technical reasons as well. And so perhaps the people you're working with that would be relevant to them as well. So, malware density increases in the dirtier places of the internet. You should be well aware of that. Okay?
Okay, is there any sign or symptoms that we know our email is hacked or vulnerable to others?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't quite understand.
Is there any sign or symptoms that we know our email or communication will be hacked or vulnerable to others? Any sign that we know?
Okay, I think the question is, are there symptoms of when your email has been compromised?
Yeah.
Okay. That is a good question. So you could pay attention, you could look through your sending folders. I guess I don't have a lot of ideas on that. Do others have ideas on that? Yes.
So one of the reasons that we like using the Google thing where you save the draft and stuff like that is because Google does have a feature where you can see when it was last accessed. So it may not tell you that it was hacked. Obviously, if you log in from another country or whatever, you'll get the little reminders, does somebody have your password? But you can actually see in the bottom, it'll say, this account was last accessed on this day from this place on this device. And so that if you're communicating with two people and we're only going to check this on these days or something like that, and then you see an abnormal thing, then that allows you to go, okay, so we're not going to be using this draft folder anymore. So it's things like that. But that's one of the things I like about Google.
Thank you.
I think two-factor authentication is also very helpful in giving you more peace of mind if you're using email.
Yeah. Are people familiar with two-factor authentication? It generally involves something you know and something you have. It's much more difficult to defeat, so yeah, that's also an excellent suggestion.
Something recently that seems to be very common now is having people's Facebook accounts hacked. So somebody tries to send you a second friend request when you can't remember if you've already given them a first friend request answer. As a user who's getting these requests, maybe I click yes, accept, which has happened to several people I know. Do then we need to change our passwords right away, or are they just trying to get money out of us through texting or something like that?
I guess I view security and convenience as inversely proportional. So if it's more convenient, it's generally less secure. So I think it's a good idea to change your password whenever you become at all suspicious. To change something, maybe even to change, yeah.
And Facebook also has the two-factor authentication, so have that set up too.
Yeah.
On that subject of passwords, do you recommend or do you use password vaults? Use it and keep all of your passwords log and complex?
I personally don't use software vault programs because I think they make really fantastic targets. And there's certainly evidence of password vault services being hacked. So if I was a hacker, that's where I would go, for sure. However, I personally store my passwords in a file, a hidden file, in a strange place that's encrypted on my drive. I feel like that's acceptable security for me, but I personally don't use vaults. However, they are very convenient.
One of the comments on passwords as well is don't use the same password on everything you do, because again, if you're hacked in one location or you lose one password that's compromised, the answer is if you've used it everywhere, everything is compromised. And this is the inverse problem of why you do want to either use a password manager or have a way of tracking your passwords, because you end up with lots of passwords.
Yeah, so that's absolutely a best practice, different passwords on different sites.
One thing I do with my passwords is I assume that someone could hack into my password file. So my password for such and such a program will be the last name of somebody followed by a few numbers, and that will remind me the real password is the first name of that person followed by those same numbers. So even if somebody hacks into my password file, they won't be able to get the right password.
Yeah, and it was shared earlier this week. This topic was presented on earlier this week at EMDC, and that material was excellent as well. So I'd encourage you to get those slides. And part of the advice there was for these hint questions, like what's your mother's maiden name or something like that, don't answer that truthfully. Just to put fake information in those hints to make it slightly more difficult. Okay?
Yeah, my wife had that thing with the Facebook. Someone resent an invitation, and then she replied to that. And I think I don't believe that that other person's site was necessarily that their Facebook site was compromised, but they were able to pull like the main picture off the site, which is stuff that's pretty much usually available to everybody to get, and they were able to fake something. But as soon as I said, well, let's check to see her friends that she's got. We could actually see the people that person had already contacted, and we contacted some of those mutual friends that we had and said, you've just been fooled, and they were looking for money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I can address that question a little further. I get this stuff happen all the time with my friends. So I typically recommend that they change their password, change their profile photo so we can distinguish between their old profile and their new profile, because it's a duplicated profile. And then send out a post to all of their friends to say, I've been hacked, don't accept a new friend request. And then the fourth thing you can do is you can actually report that new profile to Facebook, and they will investigate it and delete the profile once they figure out which one's the real one and which one's the fake one. So there's 4 steps really that you should do for that. Because what they can do is they can ask you for money, but they can get into somebody else's profile then, duplicate that one, and then go to their friends with a message as well. So you really got to break the cycle. So doing those 4 things really helps people distinguish it and then break the cycle.
I personally don't use Facebook because I don't have a felt need for it. I really enjoy face-to-face relationships. But also I understand why it was created and what it's good at, which is connecting the dots. And that's just not something I want to get involved in. So.
I guess the 2 most common places I see these things happening is in the Gmail platform. and in Facebook. And the whole, it doesn't matter how great your password is or how much you protect it. At the end of the day, if you give it up through a phishing attempt, then it doesn't matter how great you think you are with making your password inside out, upside down, and around backwards. If you go into a phishing site which looks exactly like something that was sent, and you log in on that phishing site and you think that you've logged into something, but all you really did was enter your username and then you entered your password, you've actually just handed that over, and that's where the extreme majority of people lose their credentials, is through phishing sites. And so this has happened to my wife. It's happened to me. A document came from a trusted person in our organization who was asking us questions where we need to provide documents to them through a Google Drive. Now, it just so happened, about 4 weeks later, another email came from that person saying, hey, could you please look at these things in the drive? Which was entirely in the normality of what we would have expected. And so clicked on there, wrote in the number, and it said you need to log in. Didn't think about it, put in username, password, pushed enter, and then something kind of strange happened in it, and it didn't go to where we thought, only to discover that this is how these phishing things happen. And so then what they do is they write a script, and then that script goes into your Gmail, automatically logs in. A computer will go through your entire inbox searching for keywords, and that will harvest all that out, put it into a database. They'll be looking for bank account numbers and Visa card details. This is how these guys make money. So they'll go through all of that. This is a process that will take a computer maybe 2 or 3 minutes to trawl your entire Gmail account, pulling out keywords that they've already set, and then it'll push that all into a database. And then what they'll do is they'll write a script, and they'll change your Gmail. So they'll go in and make some filters. And so anybody who writes back to you with about the email that they're about to send out. So they now send out an email to poison all of your friends saying, please fill out this Gmail document. So all your friends got that, but then your friends start writing back and saying, looks like spam, Aaron. Why are you sending me this? They write a filter in my Gmail inbox that catches all of those incoming and deletes them. So then someone tells you on the telephone, and you go in there and you say, no, I've got no emails in here telling me about this, because they're smart enough to write a filter to shift that. So you need to go and look under the tab for filters, and then you'll find, if you've been hacked, there's a filter that says anything with this keyword, spam, the email that was sent out by them will automatically be put in the deleted trash can. So these are the kinds of things that happen, and then they won't send the email out until they've harvested what they can. Once they've done that, then they send it out, so even if they get flipped in that part of the process, they've already got what they wanted. So if you get compromised in this way, they'll find emails and they'll try to match things up. That's what they're after. They're after credit card details. And I think when you do get clipped like this, you need to understand what are they looking for? Who was it? Because that tells you what kinds of things they do, tells you what kind of person they are. And so, yeah, that's the thing. And then there's a Facebook Messenger thing that's very popular right now, which is your profile photo, which gets sent to you, but it's inside a YouTube player-looking file. And it has 16,400 views, which makes you think, wow, I got 16,000 views on YouTube? What is it? And you touch it. In Facebook Messenger, it instantly does some stuff. It plants a virus inside that. Facebook Messenger is trying to shut this down right now. This is really big. But it's not clicking on these things in the first place and always reading the URL, because you'll find that it's pushpay.com, and it's hidden in the URL. So there you go.
Yeah, so practice the fruit of the Spirit and self-control.
And then unplug the internet.
Yeah, but to be careful. And so there's wisdom in many counselors. This is a great community. I'm glad that turned into a discussion time. So, talk with each other. What are your best practices, etc.
Thank you very much, John. We really appreciate that.